Hey everyone, my name's Kristi. Welcome to my corner where I talk about embroidery, cross stitch, other textile crafts, history, the history of all of those things. And today we're going to have a tutorial, which I'm going to try and do more tutorials. I have some tutorials that came out a few years ago that people seem to like how to fold handkerchiefs, how to mount a weaving or other textile. You can find, well, actually I may post those up here if you're interested in learning about those. But today, this is how to make a chicken. Because sometimes you just need a chicken. And the cool thing about this idea is that you can do it with any square. Now, I have a chicken pattern. This is Michelle, the prosperity hen. You can find her in my Kristi's Corner Needlework Etsy shop, and I'll be releasing more chickens throughout the year, at least 5. And this tutorial is a modification of Tiny Modernist's Biscornu tutorial, which I will link down below. My Etsy shop is also linked down below. And if you're interested in finishing your chicken just like this, I will also have a very limited number, I think 9. I have enough for 9 finishing kits that I will release on February 15th. 2025 in my Spoolery Etsy shop, which I will also link down below. And the reason why it's in 2 different Etsy shops is because my Spoolery Etsy shop is set up for shipping physical objects. My Kristi's Corner Needlework is not. So that's where you can find the digital pattern of Michelle if you would like her. And if you would like to stitch something else into a chicken and use my finishing pack, that will be in the Spoolery Etsy shop. And that finishing pack will include a bell, beads, spools, tails, and beaks, enough to finish a garland of 5 chickens. So there'll be 1 bell and then 5 of these spools. I couldn't think of the word, 5 spools. I'll add a few more tails and beaks and a few extra beads, but this is the finishing pack that will be available in limited quantities on February 15th, 2025. And if people like them, I will make more. And if people really like them, I'll keep them stocked all the time. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. And you might be wondering, Kristi, what is a prosperity hen, right? I said this was Michelle, the prosperity hen. A prosperity hen is a fabric it's a soft chicken made out of a square of fabric. And these come from North India, where a flock of chickens was a sign and still is a sign of prosperity in rural areas, right? Chickens are really valuable. They're really valuable to humans and to human life. They can be used in many ways that help families. So if a family had a flock of chickens, they were seen as prosperous. And what women would do when they had scraps of fabric after making saris is take those sari scraps of fabric and turn them into these chickens. And their chickens didn't look quite like this. I took a few liberties and interpreted it in my own way, but they definitely, this is definitely a North Indian idea. And essentially they're hung on garlands. And if you go online, you can buy garlands of prosperity hens or prosperity chickens that are made in India, fair trade. And I highly recommend that you go and check those out because they're amazing and the fabrics that they use are amazing. And so this is really just a cross stitch version of that. And I also show you how to make this little, the little crest comb, it's called a comb. So that's what we'll be making today. And I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, let me know. I haven't done a tutorial in a while, so it's a little bit rough and I'm using a new camera, so it's a little bit rough, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And I will see you at the end. So here are the supplies that you will need for this project. You'll need your stitched piece, obviously, which should be a square. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. You do need 2 other pieces of fabric. This one is 1 inch by 1 inch. You can see here. And that piece is for the beak. And then for the tail here, you have a 1.5 by 2.5 inch piece of fabric. And these can be any fabrics. These 2 kind of coordinate, which is why I picked them. You'll need at least 1 color of thread or floss, and this is for stitching it together, and we will be doing a visible stitch, kind of like you do for a bisque cornu. And then I am doing a kind of extra thing where I am adding some fluff to the head, so that it can be a good little, you know, like fluffy crown, crest, I think they're called, the fluffy crest. You'll need scissors. I have two kinds of scissors here, one for fabric, one for floss. I have clips, which are optional, but they will make things a little bit easier. I have a glue stick for basting, which is optional, make things a little bit easier. You could also stitch baste it. And then I have some pins, which are optional if you need them. And then finally, I have a blunt cross stitch needle. This is a size 22, I believe, for the stitching of the actual body. And then I have another sharp needle. This is an embroidery needle that I am using for stitching through the beak and the tail. And then we need some stuffing. And so these are what we need to finish any square piece into a chicken, which is the goal of today. So first of all, I want to show you that I have stitched a line of backstitch around the outside of my pattern, and this is my Michelle chicken pattern. But if you'll notice, the corners are clipped. There are 2 stitches. I've cut off the corner, 2 stitches from the corner, and just gone right across on all corners. And this will really make it much easier to stitch both sides together. If you'll notice here, this is looking a little rough in the corner because this is I didn't clip this one first. I did an actual, like a sharp corner, and it just did not work. So what you'll want to do to start off to prepare your fabric is you'll want to cut about 1 centimeter away or 1/2 inch away from your line all the way around. And you don't have to be too precious about it. This is just to make it easier to stitch. You'll have less bulk, and that's the goal. The goal is as little bulk as possible. And then you want to clip your corners. They don't have to be close. You don't have to get too close. This isn't like, you know, when you're sewing something that you're going to have to turn inside out. This is just to make it easier to sew together. That's clipped. Now we're going to prepare these 2 pieces of fabric. And this is where the glue stick comes in. So for your beak fabric, you're going to fold it in half. So you have a triangle, and fold it in half again. So you have a nice triangle, and your point doesn't have any raw edges. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue baste this. So I'm going to this is just an Elmer's washable glue stick. It goes on purple and it dries clear. This does not need to be a permanent hold. It just needs to stick it. And we're doing the same thing for this side. And then I'm just going to put it under there just to keep it flat. Now with this one, you are going to you kind of want a little fluffy tail. So the way to do this is just to roll it. So I'm going to just do a little line of glue and then fold it and then roll it like this. Do another little line of glue and do that. And for this one, you could also honestly use clips to keep it together as well. So we're just going to let those dry. And we're going to prepare our piece here. So the way that we're stitching this is we are stitching through this line here. We're not stitching into the fabric if we can possibly help it. So we want to make sure that we have a nice clear line for our stitches. So I am just finger pressing all the way around, and doing this sort of preparatory finger pressing will really help with the ease of doing the stitches. And so I'm just folding it next to, so that we are making this line, this back stitch line, very available for stitching. And now we have very clear lines, and that'll just make stitching so much easier. Now we want to start our stitching process. And I'm using this lighter brown in order to show you what the stitch will look like, but essentially, usually you would do the same color for that you have done your back stitch in for your sewing stitch, but I'm not doing that so that you can see what's going on. So I'm going to do about double the length that I think I'll need. I'm going to thread my needle with a fold at the end of the thread. I'm going to use my cross stitch needle, thread it, and then we want to start at the front or the back. So this is going to be folded this way. And so we want to fold in our corner, fold in our sides, and that is where we're starting. We're starting on that corner right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little piece from the inside here and then just do a loop lark's head knot. So now this is attached to the fabric. So we're folded in and we did our finger pressing. And so you want to sew through the back stitch, not the fabric. I don't know if you can see that, but we're sewing through the back stitch, not the fabric. And I'm just going to take 2 stitches just to really tighten up that corner. And you go up without picking up the fabric. There we go. And the beginning is the hardest part of this, because you need to sort of have everything in place. I'm just doing another one at the beginning. And now we're rocking and rolling. And now is when you have to decide when you want to put your beak in. So we have to bring our beak up. And this is why we basted it, because the beak essentially nestles, but I'm going to trim off the corners of my beak. Trim off the top corner. And the beak essentially nestles in there. But we cannot use our cross stitch needle anymore. We have to use our sharp needle because we have to go through that fabric. So we're going to unthread that, put that back in our place here. And I'm going to clip this right there. And that'll kind of keep things relatively stable. And so that's what our beak is going to look like. And now we need to switch to our sharp needle. And whereas before we were basically looping, right? We were coming up through, like through the right side, through the left side, and then coming back around, right side, left side, coming back around. Now we're going to be kind of weaving back and forth. So we have our first stitch, And we want to catch, I don't know if you can see, we're catching that beak going through the other side there, catching. And then instead of going sort of looping around, we're going through the next back stitch, and this is hard to show. And going through the beak again. And then going through that back stitch. Not looping it around the beak. And going through, looping through the next back stitch on that side. And going through like that, going through the beak, picking up this back stitch here, pulling tight. So basically what we're doing is we are, instead of looping around like this, we're going back and forth until we get to the end of this beak. For your last one, you just want to catch a little bit of that fold, maybe a little more than that. A little bit of that fold. Go through the final stitch. And now your beak is secure. So you can take this clip off. You don't have to worry about that. And you can switch back to your cross stitch needle and keep doing your stitches until you get to about here. You want to get to about here with your stitches, and then do the same thing on the other side. And you'll find that the areas that have stitching close to the back stitch are the toughest to do, just because there's more bulk. You just have to do your best, you know, like, nothing's perfect, so we just have to do our best. It also helps to have good light and possibly a magnifying glass. I have pretty decent light, but no magnifying glass, so yeah, so there we go. Now we can see that we have the beak attached. We have the sort of, what is that? The gobbler. It's not a gobbler because that's for turkeys. And then we just continue on. And we want to pull relatively tight, although you don't want to break any thread, obviously. The main thing you want to make sure of is that you catch all of your back stitch. So my back stitch is 2 strands. And so I need to make sure that I catch both strands and not the fabric. Although, in all honesty, if you catch the fabric, it's not the end of the world. So I'm just going to go a couple more stitches and then I will kind of start on the other side. And if you notice, I'm sort of like pinching it together. You could use a clip at this point, but I find it's easier for me to stitch and see what I'm doing if I'm holding it pretty close. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to stop this side there, and then I'm going to start on this end and do all of this until I get to about here, and this is where we'll stuff it with the polyfill. So I'm going to leave this. I'm not tying this off. I'm leaving it where it is. So let's start with this side. We'll pull another piece. And we'll do the same thing. We will thread it onto our cross stitch needle. So we're threading it so that there is a loop right there. And we will fold in our corner and take our little piece of fabric, take our loop, you can see that, and then it's secure. And then we fold in our edges, find our 2 corner stitches, do a couple of stitches in the corner, to make sure that corner is secure. And then we do the same thing that we did for the head, we do it the same thing for the butt. We take a piece there, we go to the one across from it, we do a couple of those stitches, and now our corner is secure. So then we just keep going down the lane. One thing you gotta make sure of when you're at the corner is that you don't have your sewing thread go over the corner and get caught on the back over here. At this point, some of the hardest part is getting both threads of my back stitch and not getting my fabric. Okay, now that we're 3 or 4 stitches in, I'm going to do one more stitch, then we work on the tail feathers. There we go. That was like absurd. Okay, now we have our tail, and our tail has been basted, and it is not like a permanent baste, but our tail's been basted, and we want to essentially stick it in the butt. So I want it like that. I basically want it parallel with the back. And because this is so heavy, I'm going to clip it, or this is longer, I'm going to clip it in there. Now, you can cut this in that direction, but I'm not going to worry about it. And then we do something very similar to what we did with the beak. You want to switch out your cross stitch needle for your embroidery or sharp needle. And we're already through this here, so I'm going to pierce through the fabric, and I'm going to find the next thread, not wrap it around the tail. Pull it tight, go through the tail, feather, pull tight, And just kind of weave back and forth. Try not to go through your sort of stitched fabric, but honestly you can. I mean, no one's gonna notice. It'll just make it more secure, but it's much harder to avoid the fabric when you're using a sharp needle than when you are using a more blunt cross stitch needle. And once you're about halfway through, you can remove the clip because it's just in your way now, and that's now secured. And it looks like that is my last through stitch. So we're unthreading that. We're putting this back on our cross stitch needle. And continuing with our overhand stitches, which I can never remember. I cannot remember the name of the stitch. And so that is a secured tail feather. Now I'm using a 28, a size 22 cross stitch needle, and I think a 24, like a little bit smaller, would make this easier. You don't want it too small because you like don't want to pierce through the fabric all the time, like I'm doing. So I decided to switch out my 22 size needle for a 26 size needle, and it is making the biggest difference. I was just feeling like the 22 size was much too bulky. I'm going to continue doing my whip stitch until I get to the corner, and I'll come back and show you how I deal with that. So I'm getting close to the bottom corner here, and you'll notice right here there's a little bit of a pucker. That is because I somewhere up here skipped a stitch on this side, or two on this side, and so I had to make up for it so that way the corner meets. So it looks not great when it's flat, but this is going to be like puffy, and you won't even notice it when it's stuffed. So I have 3 stitches until I am at the bottom. So I'm going to do those. And, you know, if you miss a couple stitches, like I said, you just kind of fudge it and it's fine. But you just need to make sure that your bottom stitches meet. Like that's the goal. So we are at the bottom. Well, I have 1 stitch until the bottom, but I do want to kind of fold things down so that way we can stitch them. And you just kind of keep stitching. And you stitch around. I like it a little bit pointy at the bottom, and I'll show you in a second once I get past this section. I like the bottom pointy. It feels like it's, I don't know, it feels like how it's supposed to be. Okay, and now we want to fold these in and keep going. Okay, so we have a little opening here for stuffing, but I did want to point out, if you look at the original, it's got a pointy bottom, right? It's got a little pointy bottom. Now, if you were to make that wider, that's super cute. And it could even maybe sit, whereas this one is made for hanging. You could cut that off right there and have a slightly less triangular chicken. All right, let us stuff her. Let's stuff her. with our fiber fill. Now I am using just polyester fiber fill. And as you stuff her, you want to really get the stuffing in the points, because that'll give you like your real good chicken shape. And you'll feel like you've stuffed her as much as you can stuff her, but you can put more in, trust me. You can almost always put more in. I mean, until you can't, I suppose. How's that? You can get some in the bottom. But you see, like, you can barely even see that there's a wrinkle there. You can see it a little bit, but you can barely see it. If you want perfect, this is not the channel for you. And so now we need to close it up. Make sure there's enough in there. Now we need to close her up. And so this is another time when clips or pins will work really well. And I think for this, I would do a pin. Just try not to injure yourself, honestly. But this will be less intrusive and it will make things easier. So she's stuffed, nice and stuffed, and now we will close her up. Oh, we could use more up there, actually. Okay. Okay. And the very tips, you might not be able to get anything into because of these different, the tail and the beak. But what you're looking for is this kind of, you know, swoop back. So it looks like a head, a neck, and then a tail. Now, we're gonna stuff that in. We're gonna pin it. There we go. So I'm gonna start with this side until about there, and then we'll go from this side and go to about there, just to close it up. I think that's about as far as I'm gonna get. And I'm gonna start with, finish up with this side going down. Okay, so now we have this end. And there are a couple options here. You could tie this in a knot, which would be easy to do. Just like tie them together. Tie them again. And that would kind of take care of it. You could do a sort of sewing knot. You could then, depending on where this is, tie this in like a little bow and just have it be a part of the chicken, although it's a little bit thin for that, so I'm not sure I love that. But what I'm going to do is, it's tied in a knot, so I'm going to thread it on a needle, and I'm going to use my 22, since there are 4 strands now. And I'm just going to sew this in like that. Pull it through. And then just, I'm kind of pulling it taut, right? I'm pulling it pretty tight. And then when you do that, it's inside. So then you have a chicken. And you could stop there. And this is a perfectly lovely chicken. Actually, this turned out really nicely. You can see there's kind of the head crest. There is the little chest right there. And so this, I think, is a lovely little chicken. We do have to do the tail. And then I want to show you how I did this little crest here. So to do the tail, carefully take your scissors and you're just cutting strips in your tail. And you're getting close, but not too close to the tail. And I want that a little bit closer. And I want that a little bit closer. Like that. And then you kind of fan it out and you have this really cute little tail feathers. And so I'd hope to get them a little bit more up, but they aren't, and that's okay. So there we have our chicken. And our final step is to do this little fluff. This little fluff here. That's our final step right here. And we do that with a lark's head knot, which is the same thing we did to start off, honestly. But this is very much a weaving or a macrame knot. So you want to take, I would take maybe 1.5 lengths of floss and cut it in half. So you have about that much. That is about 8 inches. So you have about 8 inches. I don't know what that is in centimeters. I'm sorry. I will look it up and put it here. And you want to use 2 strands for each fluff. And they'll be folded in half. And so it's like folded like that. Right? Then you will thread it onto your needle. Now I'm going to try and thread it onto my size 26 needle. Oh, good, it worked. I've been struggling with this needle. I can't see very well, so it's threaded like that, where the loose ends are through the needle and the loop is at the end. And you take your chicken head and you find that kind of first one and you put your needle underneath it like that. You pull it through gently and then you pick up your loop and you loop it through. And that's a lark's head knot. Now you have this long string here which you will cut off, but that's how you do it. And you just kind of do that for all of them. And I'll show you again, but you want to kind of start in the middle and then you work your way out. That way you're not fighting with it. But you take your strands and you pull them off. You get 2 strands. I separate them individually because otherwise they end up twisting in on each other and it's just a pain. So that's how I do it. You can separate them however you want. Go to the next stitch. And I'm trying to get under the whole stitch, not just the top. Like the final, so like I'm trying to get under the entire X, not just the last stitch. Where are we there? Oh. Make sure it doesn't wrap around anything. That could be a pain. And if it gets loose, if like parts of it are loose, like what just happened, just kind of tug on each individual strand and it'll tighten up. There's 2. And you just do that for all of them, all of the stitches. So I'm about to do my final one, which is here. Doing my final little stitch, and just a reminder, it's a loop. You find your final stitch, you put it through like that, pull it, go through your little loop, and pull. And now we have a lusciously locked chicken. And you can put more in if you want, and you can leave her long and luscious, like Jessica Rabbit from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Long ago reference, but I am going to cut it. What I'm going to do, my plan is to just take some scissors, cut it about there, fluff it out, and we have this adorable little chicken. And yeah, this is how I make my prosperity hens. And so now that you have your chicken done, you can string it on a garland, which is what I'm going to do, and which is kind of the traditional thing that you're going to do. You can just put a little loop on it. You can just sew a loop onto the top and hang it from a door. I'm going to put some bells on the bottom, but this is our hen. This is our prosperity hen, and I love her, and I hope you do too. So there you have it. There is how to make a prosperity hen. I hope that you found it useful, and I hope if you do make your own hens, your own prosperity hens, that you will tag me on Instagram at Dr._Kristi. I'll put that right here. If you're interested in stitching this exact particular chicken, you can find her in my Kristi's Corner Etsy shop down below. I will have another chicken pattern available at the end of February, and I'm hoping to have one per month at least through the summer so that you can get 5 chickens. So if you would like to make a 5 chicken garland out of the finishing pack, that will be available on February 15th, 2025, you'll be able to do that with cross-stitch chickens, and they'll all be different. They will all look different. And you can find the finishing packs, like I said, on February 15th, 2025 in my Spoolery Etsy shop, which is linked down below. So that's it from me. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's make some chickens because they're adorable and maybe it will bring us good luck. Thanks so much for watching. Please take good care of yourselves and have a good one. Bye.